In a secluded countryside, far from the hustle and bustle of towns, stood an old, forsaken house draped in shadows and silence. The house was tall and looming, resembling a giant whose spirit had long since faded. Its windows, once bright with life, now resembled hollow eyes staring into the abyss, as if watching the world go by without a care. The walls wore a skeletal veneer of peeling paint, gray and chipped, clinging to secrets long since buried, their stories hidden behind layers of decay. Vines twisted around the house, creeping up like fingers trying to reach the sky, while the wind howled softly through the trees, making them sway as if whispering secrets to one another. A heavy stillness enveloped the place like a comforting blanket, but it was the kind that suffocated rather than soothed. It was a home that had seen better days, now only shrouded in the macabre whispers of its crumbling past. The yard was overgrown with wild grass and weeds, with forgotten toys peeking through as if longing to be played with once more. Inside this eerie dwelling lived a boy named Oliver, a boy with curious eyes the color of emeralds and an adventurous spirit that often led him to places where others feared to tread. Oliver had always been an explorer at heart. He loved to venture into the unknown, whether it was a hidden path in the woodlands or a dusty corner of the attic. His family had decided to move to this quiet, remote location after his parents yearned for peace away from the busy city life. Little did they know, as they unpacked boxes and set up their new home, that peace could often hide insidious dangers and secrets best left undisturbed. As the sun dipped below the horizon on their first night, Oliver felt a sense of unease settle in his stomach, yet his curiosity outweighed his fear. That first night, while exploring the dim, winding corridors, his heart raced with anticipation, but he also felt an unsettling chill crawl down his spine, as if unseen hands were tracing the nape of his neck. The air felt thick around him, heavy with the weight of untold stories, and he brushed off the sensation, eager to uncover the mysteries embedded in the very bones of the house. Each creak of the floorboards beneath his feet sent a shiver through him, sounding like whispers of long-lost voices buried beneath the dust. As day turned to night, the shadows danced mockingly in the flickering candlelight. The light played tricks on his eyes, making shapes twist and turn across the walls. Oliver settled into his room, a place filled with remnants of the past, toys that looked like they had come from another era, faded photographs that depicted ghostly figures, and curtains that swayed restlessly as if trying to reveal a dark secret to him. The boy lay in his bed, cocooned in blankets that smelled of mothballs and thyme, but sleep eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he could swear he heard faint echoes, whispers snaking through the corridors like tendrils of smoke, curling and unfurling around him. Then, from deep within the house, a sound rang out, echoing through the stillness like a chime struck at midnight. It was like a distant thunderclap reverberating in his chest. Oliver sat up, his heart racing wildly, as an eerily familiar voice beckoned him from the dark. Oliver, it called, but not his name alone. It was a sound dripped in dread, lingering in the air like a malignant presence. It was as if the house itself was alive, and it was calling him closer, pulling him into its haunting embrace. He hesitated, unsure if the whispers were just a figment of his imagination, but the lustrous curiosity tugged at him, sweet yet dangerous. He slipped from his bed, the floorboards creaking beneath his feet like the hushed murmurs of an audience watching intently. A feeling of dread settled over him, yet he took a deep breath and ventured forth, for the call felt almost like a challenge to explore. Wrapped in a cloak of courage, he knew he had to follow it. He wrapped his tiny fingers around the banister, feeling its cold, jagged texture against his palm, and descended the staircase that seemed to groan under the weight of the night. As he made his way through the dimly lit corridors, every door he passed felt alive, as though possessed by the memories of the past. The shadows shifted and flickered in the corners of his vision, teasing him, urging him to look further. The voice drew him toward the basement, a place Oliver had been warned never to visit, a realm filled with darkness and entrapment. A twisted sense of fear and fascination coursed through him, urging him to go further and further into the unknown. He reached the door leading to the basement, the surface rough and stained with what looked like old rust, perhaps blood from stories of pain and sorrow obscuring whatever lay within. The door was slightly ajar, and a chill emanated from the darkness beyond. My heart pounded in my chest as he drew closer. He hesitated, swallowing hard as fear mingled with intrigue. Taking a deep breath, he grasped the cold handle and pulled the door open. With a deep, cavernous groan that echoed through the empty halls, the door swung inward, revealing a staircase cloaked in darkness. The air turned thick and musty, mingled with a scent that was almost putrid, as if time itself had decayed in this hidden chamber. Shadows lurked within, towering and jagged, waiting like predators to swallow him whole. "I'm here," his voice whispered to himself, hoping to summon the last shred of courage he had left. As he descended into the inky blackness, the chilling voice echoed again from the shadows, now tinged with a blood-curdling glee. "You can't hide from me, Oliver." He stumbled forward, his small flashlight flickering intermittently, barely illuminating the walls that seemed to bulge and breathe like a ravenous beast, which made him hold the flashlight tighter. Oliver felt a shiver crawl down his spine, the very air thrumming with a foreboding rhythm, a warning, perhaps, that he wasn't alone. The walls whispered back, unsettling sounds that echoed his own name, not just a name, but a haunting chant that rose louder and louder, filling in the gaps like a symphony of shadows, and he could feel it resonating deep within his chest. "Stay with me, Oliver," it hissed, dripping with a demoniac delight, and he wondered where the voice was coming from. It seemed to wrap around him like tendrils of smoke, tightening and swirling, creating an unseen barrier that made the air feel electric. As if caught in a spell, he felt drawn further into the abyss, deeper into the unknown. He reached a small room at the end of the basement, its doorway framed by damp, decaying wood that groaned under even his lightest touch. There, in the dead center of the room, stood an old doll, grotesque and malformed, its glass eyes glittering with an eerie light that seemed to draw him in. The space felt charged with a malevolent energy, pricking his skin as if the house itself were alive and aware of his presence. The doll was smiling, a sinister, cloying grin that sent a wave of nausea washing over him. Its clothes were frayed and yellowed with age, an assortment of colors that once must have been bright and joyful. "Look at her, isn't she beautiful?" The voice rattled, now mocking and eerie, circling around him, taunting his resolve. "No," Oliver cried out, taking a step back, instinctively trying to retreat. He turned, but the shadows behind him swelled, swirling like a tempest, preventing his escape. The presence engulfing the room felt consuming and suffocating, as if time itself had twisted into something hostile. The doll began to sway as if caught in a ghastly dance, its head tilting to the side in curiosity, and the whispers grew louder, alive and hungry, swirling around his head, feeding off his fear, vibrating through him with a dark energy that felt undeniably real. Resouled within the depths of his despair, Oliver's mind thrashed against the onslaught of horror. He felt dizzy, the world around him spinning into chaotic madness, and despite every ounce of his being wanting to flee, he remained rooted to the spot, captivated by the voice and its clutches. "You're one of us now," it crooned, the shadows swirling like thick smoke, enveloping him completely. With a sudden rush of adrenaline, Oliver's instincts kicked in. He clenched his fists, and with a fierce determination, he shouted, "Leave me alone." His voice echoed through the darkness, loud and clear. And for a moment, everything grew silent. The shadows hesitated, retreating slightly, allowing a thin beam of light from his flickering flashlight to cut through the gloom. Oliver took a step backward, heart pounding in his ears, as he realized he had power over this sinister world. He backed up quickly, turning to escape. But even as he tried to run away, the dark energy seemed to cling to him like a heavy mist, reluctant to let him go. Fear surged through him, urging him to make a quick getaway, to escape the clutches of the doll and the voice that sought to ensnare him forever. He rushed back toward the staircase, the cold air biting at his skin as he clambered up the steps, nearly tripping on the last few. The further he got, the more the whispers faded into a soft, sinister giggle, echoing through the walls as if to remind him that they would always be watching. With a burst of renewed strength, he flung himself back through the door, slamming it shut behind him, his heart racing with a wild cadence. In the fragile light of the hallway, he pressed his back against the door and gasped for air, his breaths shallow and quick. He could still feel the remnants of that chilling presence lingering around him, a shadow casting an ill omen over his mind. Looking down the dark corridor of his new home, he knew this was not the end, rather, it was just the beginning of dark chapters yet to unfold. His heart still thudding loudly in his chest, Oliver turned and hurried back toward his room, locking the basement door behind him. As he crawled under the covers, the warmth felt like a lifeline against the terror that clutched at his heart. He lay there wide awake, the haunting voice still echoing in the corners of his mind. But somewhere in that dark room, he also felt a seed of determination grow within him. He wasn't going to let the whispers win. He would uncover the truth behind the shadows that lurked in his home, and he would confront whatever it was that clung to the dark corners of that house. As he drifted into a restless sleep, he vowed that he would be brave like the adventurer he knew he was deep inside. There would be more to discover, and he would not shy away from the horrors or the mysteries that awaited him. Tomorrow would be a new day, one filled with questions waiting for answers just beyond the dusky horizons of his echoing house. Days turned into nights, yet the haunting echo of that foul voice lingered in Oliver's mind. It formed an invisible chain that bound him to the sour memories of that terrible night, a night that felt both like the distant past and yet so painfully close. He felt like a pawn in a grotesque game, a game he never agreed to play, stuck in a world that was becoming harder to understand. His new house, once alive with laughter and warmth, began to feel cold and unwelcoming. Every corner he turned felt like it was hiding something from him, something sinister. The shadows in his once sunny home grew longer, twisting into shapes that made his heart race. During the day, the sunlight would peek in through the windows, trying to warm the rooms, but the shadows crept up the walls like phantoms, making everything feel eerie and strange. It was as if the house itself understood his fears and was playing along, making them worse. In his room, the doll sat where he had left it, seemingly motionless. But Oliver was sure it watched him with its unnerving glass eyes. Whenever he closed his own, he could swear he heard faint giggles skimming through the unsettling stillness, tickling his ears and making his skin crawl. It was as if there were little beings hiding in the corners, whispering secrets and sharing giggles meant only for them. Whispers slithered through the halls, wrapping around him like cold mist, gnawing at his thoughts until all that was left was despair, an aching feeling settling deep in his heart. His parents remained blissfully unaware of the sinister pull the house exerted on him. They thought he was just adjusting to a new environment, a new life. They often commented on how he seemed distant, lost in his own world. Their voices sounded far away, like echoes from a dream he couldn't grasp. They chuckled as they tried to coax him into playing outside with the other neighborhood kids, but he felt frozen, trapped in his own thoughts, unable to escape from the foreboding weight that pressed on his shoulders. As nights passed, each became a trial of sanity for Oliver. Lying in bed, he would lay awake, filled with fear that the shadows were creeping in closer. He could almost feel them tugging at him, pulling at his limbs as they whispered secrets that sent shivers up his spine. He couldn't shake off the feeling that something was waiting for him in the depths of the house, a presence lurking just beyond reach. At school, he found it hard to pay attention. The hollow voice that filled his mind drowned out the teacher's words. While the others chatted and laughed with their friends, Oliver began to withdraw further into himself. His old friends would joke and play games, but those moments felt like a distant memory, slipping away like water through his fingers. Loneliness wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. Yet, in this solitude, he discovered a strange kind of solace in the house's darker secrets that he couldn't share with anyone. One afternoon, curiosity pulled him to the attic, a place that felt like another world altogether. Dust hung in the air like tiny stars, swirling into shapes as he rummaged through an old trunk. The attic felt both cozy and chilling, filled with the whispers of forgotten things. He unearthed a tattered, dusty diary, its pages worn and frayed, begging to unveil its secrets. As Oliver leafed through the fragile pages, the words spilled like inked shadows painting eerie pictures of sorrow and despair. Each entry told a story of a family that had once beamed with joy but was now consumed by the dark force that lingered in the house. "We can never escape," one entry read, its handwriting scratchy and unsettling as if written in a rush by someone who felt desperate and afraid. It hinted at the ominous grip that the entity had on all those who dared to call this house their home. Oliver's heart raced as he swallowed the words like bitter medicine, and a chill crept through him. The diary painted a chilling picture of darkness, a malevolence that fed on fear, growing stronger with each moment of despair. With every entry, the panic and urgency bled from the pages, detailing the family's failed attempts to break free from the house's clutches until the uneasy words suddenly stopped, leaving a chilling silence. The final page resembled a scrawl, an incoherent mess that hinted at the unspeakable horrors reserved for anyone who lingered too long. The weight of it all sank heavily into Oliver's chest, filled with a truth he wished he could cast away. Desiring some kind of resolution, Oliver resolved to confront the voices that taunted him night after night. One gloomy evening when the sky was a smothering gray, he crept down the creaky stairs toward the basement, clutching the diary like a fragile shield to protect against the invincible fear. The air grew thick and heavy, carrying a stifling tension that made his skin prickle. The familiar voice slithered through the darkness like a shadow, wrapping around him like a suffocating fog. "Why do you resist, Oliver?" It crooned, its tone thick with an unsettling allure, almost like honey with a hidden sting. "We have so much to show you." Before he could respond or gather his thoughts, the shadows began to breathe and morph, twisting into grotesque arched shapes that danced around him in a nightmarish ballet. Their laughter pulsed within him, low and simmering like a fire ready to ignite. Oliver clutched the diary closely, the inked words shimmering with an eerie life, as if they could provide some source of strength. "You're just a boy," the voice hissed, each word dripping with morbid amusement. "You cannot carry the weight of this truth." Somewhere within that tumultuous cacophony, another voice spoke, a voice that felt both hopeful and fragile, weaving through the darkness in a desperate plea. "Help us," it vibrated in the air, echoing through the ages. The deep desire to break free tugged fiercely at Oliver's heart. He thought of the silhouettes trapped in the shadows, echoing a call to be free just as he wished to escape. He turned once more to the doll, its ghastly grin seeming sharper in the dim light as if it thrived on his flickering hope. Summoning a strength he didn't know he had, he shouted back at the looming darkness, "Let me go." The shadows recoiled, as though stricken. A sound like a putrid hiss sliced through the air, swirling around him like a howling tempest. For a heartbeat, it felt as if his desperate cry had resonated within the darkness. They hesitated, caught in a moment of uncertainty, as if they were taken aback by his audacity. However, something deep within him whispered the truth. There was no sympathy behind those hollow eyes, only an unquenchable hunger for despair, gnawing at him with eagerness and longing. With desperation surging, fear reignited his instincts, and he turned to flee. Battling against the consuming shadows, he propelled himself forward, his truth striking the walls that felt cold and unyielding. He dashed through the corridors, threading his way past rooms that felt like they were closing in tighter around him, threatening to trap him in their dark embrace. His heart thumped loudly, drumming against his chest, drowning out the whispers that chased him. Just as he reached the staircase, the voice intensified. It became more sinister than before, its words coiling around him like thick, constricting vines. "You cannot escape your fate, Oliver." The weight of that statement drilled into him like a nail, sharp and biting. Terror surged as he bolted up the stairs, nearly slipping on the wooden treads that felt like they were reaching out to grab him. As soon as he reached the top, he slammed the door behind him. He leaned against the sturdy wood and closed his eyes, breathing heavily, his heart still racing. The darkness had spoken, wrapping Oliver in an eerie sense of dread. But deep inside, he felt flickers of determination sparking. Even though he was just a boy, he refused to bow to the shadows. In the safety of his room, he took a moment to collect himself. The diary rested on the bed beside him like a heavy secret, its pages whispering to him, urging him to read more, to find out about the secrets hidden long before his time. He knew he needed to confront this malevolent force, learn more about the families who had come before him, and understand the darkness that refused to let go of the house. His journey into the house's twisted past had only just begun, and with each secret unveiled, Oliver felt stronger. Determined, he decided that no matter the terror that lay ahead, he would not be a pawn in the shadows' grotesque game any longer. He had to dig deep into the history of the house, discover the strength within himself, and focus his energy on uncovering the truth. He was afraid, yes, but he was also filled with hope, a flickering flame that refused to be snuffed out. In a world where shadows loomed large, Oliver was ready to reclaim his light. The days stretched out like a dreadful echo, each one blending into the next in a monstrous rhythm that darkened Oliver's heart. It was like a dreadful storm had swept into his life, chilling him to the bone and blocking out the sun. He felt alone, like a lonely little seed buried deep in the ground, missing the warmth and light of the world above. Around him, shadows formed thick patches like spilled ink, and they crept slowly, covering everything that once felt safe. Oliver found it challenging to remember the last time he felt happy. Joy seemed to slip through his fingers like water, leaving only a thirst for the happiness that danced just out of reach. He began to hear unsettling whispers, low and threatening, sneaking into his head when he least expected it. The whispers wove tales that felt dangerously close, pulling at the threads of his spirit, wrapping around him tightly like a sailor caught in a storm-tossed sea. He tried to shake them off, but they clung to him, refusing to let go. His parents noticed that something was wrong. They exchanged worried looks when they thought Oliver wasn't watching. Their faces wore wrinkles of uncertainty, like a crumpled piece of paper filled with questions they didn't dare voice. One evening, during a quiet dinner where the mood was heavy with unspoken words, Oliver's mother gently suggested, "He needs to see a doctor." Her voice trembled slightly, filled with concern. But in Oliver's heart, he knew that seeking help wouldn't solve the problems swirling around him. There was something deeper, darker, lurking within the shadows of their home, something that felt much more real than any doctor could understand. He felt hollow. He was like an empty shell washed ashore, lost and forgotten. The familiar heat and brightness of sunlight turned into mere shadows in Oliver's world. Whenever the sun streamed through the windows, it felt pale and cold, like a faded memory. He avoided even trying to enjoy the fresh air outside. Instead, he found comfort in the basement. Night after night, he tiptoed down the creaky stairs, drawn to the room where the whispers grew louder. The darkness became his companion. He felt it wrap around him, embracing him like a long-lost friend. In the dim light of that room, the doll sat waiting for him. Its eyes glinted with an eerie glow, and its smile stretched wider, a hungry smile that invited Oliver closer. "Stay with us, Oliver," the doll sang, its voice soft yet haunting, like the breeze weaving through the trees on a cold, dark night. "Together, we can be free, together, we can escape." Each word sent a shiver down Oliver's spine, but there was a twisted comfort in the promise. The doll's very presence felt heavy with longing, and it ignited a flicker of curiosity within him. The air around him felt thick, wrapping him in a sticky web of temptation. "Come closer," it beckoned, its glass eyes glimmering with a light so bright and inviting. Yet, Oliver felt a growing dread within him, knowing he was at a crossroads. He grasped tightly to what little remained of his true self, trying to hold on against the tide of darkness that threatened to pull him away. What if the shadows were right? What if, deep down, he did belong in that twisted world? Oliver hesitated at the edge of the room, the voices swirling around him like a storm, and the shadows danced in the corners of his vision, constantly shifting and morphing. Then came the night when the whispers grew louder, more insistent, and each word seemed to vibrate in his bones. They pressed closer, wrapping around him in a suffocating embrace. The shadows around him, once merely dark shapes, now formed into ghastly figures, twisted and jarring, like echoes of people long lost to sadness. "Join us," they whispered, their voices blending together in eerie harmony, chilling yet inviting. "You're already ours. Give in." Their promises wrapped around him in deceptive silk, trying to entice him into the depths of despair. In that moment, Oliver glimpsed the essence of his own life, a dazzling but broken puzzle scattered in front of him. Memories of laughter danced like flickering flames, only to be snuffed out by the cackle of despair that echoed in his ears. A shudder ran through him, and he could feel the shadows pressing ever closer, stretching out their sinister hands, ready to take him into their fold. He thought about the game he once adored, about the adventures in his favorite books, and of the sunny days spent playing with friends. It all felt so far away now, like a fragile dream slipping through his fingers. Clenching his fists, Oliver summoned every ounce of determination he could muster. "I will not surrender," he shouted into the suffocating darkness, his voice trembling yet strained with courage. But the shadows were powerful, and their grip was tightening, pulling at the edges of his resolve like the tide creeping up the shore, always advancing. It felt as if everything he was, everything he had been, was being pulled into the depths of a raging sea. With trembling hands, he reached for the doll, feeling its wicked energy flourishing beneath his fingertips. As he touched the cursed object, a cold wave washed over him. An invisible string connected him to the chilling past of those who had come before him. In that moment, the doll's aura enveloped him completely, and terror coursed through his veins, drawing him deeper into groaning shadows, feeling as if he was being devoured by the darkness. The walls of the room began to close in, transforming into jagged teeth ready to swallow him whole, as the whispers swelled louder, echoing with despair. Then there was silence. An oppressive stillness filled the room, weighing heavily on his chest, suffocating any remnants of resistance. The doll's wicked smile softened, morphing into something unsettlingly gentle. A voice, soothing yet filled with an eerie echo, enveloped him. "You belong to us now," it crooned, sending shivers racing down his spine. At that moment, Oliver felt a strange acceptance wash over him. The shadows wrapped around his heart, and he could feel their cold breath against his skin as they welcomed him, merging with his very essence. A chill seeped into his thoughts, draining away any lingering hope. He felt himself dissolving into that darkness, the sounds of whispers harmonizing around him, soothing in nature yet pervaded with a sickening twist. It was an embrace of empty affection, wrapping him tighter than he could have ever imagined. Each night morphed into a vivid tableau of gloom. Oliver wandered through the twisted hallways of his mind, encountering distorted shapes dancing in the shadows with an unholy glee that sent a shiver through his bones. The doll watched over him, never taking its gaze away, and in those reflective eyes, he saw the faces of countless others who had once come there, each one drawn into its relentless grasp. Their fearful echoes transformed into a jumbled blend of longing and acceptance, creating a tapestry of utter despair. In those dreadful nights, the whispers began to unveil forgotten stories. The energy of lost souls wrapped around him, each tale sparking a deep, haunting melancholy within. They were all searching for something he no longer knew he desired. Hints of happiness flitted past him like shadows, but every time he reached out, they darted away, eluding his grasp. The echoes of their longing filled the air, washing over him like waves of bitter nostalgia. There was once a child who had come here, yearning for adventure. Another soul, trapped by the fear of abandonment, had hoped to find joy in that darkened room. Each of their stories weighed heavily on Oliver's heart, urging him to join their ranks, to become a part of the swirling darkness that surrounded him. And yet, deep inside a flicker of rebellion remained. Each time the shadows twisted toward him with open arms, he could feel a small voice lingering in the back of his mind, a soft whisper fighting to be heard amidst the chaos. It told him to remember the sunlit days, the laughter, and the friends who believed in him. As tears spilled from his eyes, he wondered if there was a way back to that light. He could almost hear it calling to him amidst the rumbling shadows, promising warmth, safety, and adventure. Would the light still welcome him if he broke free from this darkness? Would it embrace him if he chose to resist the horrifying pull of the doll? Inside his heart, he felt a faint glimmer of determination. He might be trapped within the gaping maw of despair, but he would not let it consume him without a fight. Oliver drew in a sharp breath and prepared for the battle ahead, knowing it wouldn't be easy, but also understanding that he had to try. There was still a chance he might turn the tide. Time became a nebulous concept as Oliver lost grasp on the days that turned into nights. Each dawn crept in with a suffocating weight, the sunlight banished from the windows, leaving only the gnawing dread that pervaded every room. The house had become a living entity, an ominous being that fed off the despair it cultivated. Oliver felt alone, and at the same time, he found solace in its embrace, an intoxicating blend of fear intertwined with the sense of entrapment. A feeling he had begun to crave, even though it terrified him. Massive, dark shadows danced across the walls, and Oliver imagined they had thoughts of their own, whispering secrets to each other, sharing their sorrowful stories. It would often be said that homes are built on love and warmth, but this house was an unholy amalgamation of sorrow, a prison for those who dared to stay too long. It loomed over him, its very structure sagging with age and despair, as if it wept for lost time and forgotten memories. Dust hung in the air like little ghosts, and the creaking floorboards told tales of anguish as Oliver walked from room to room. As days slipped lazily away, Oliver became a phantom within its walls. Sometimes he would find himself speaking, his voice echoing around him as if the house were listening, but now it echoed with such a haunting undertone that it chilled him to the bone. "Come play with us," it would beckon, resonating within the very marrow of his being. This voice was no longer a simple whisper. It carried weight and urgency, pulling him in as if inviting him to join a secret gathering of spirits. What had once felt like a game now transformed into something much more unsettling, something he craved to understand but feared to embrace. On a night rife with an ominous chill, he felt the thrumming call of the doll, the evil whisper spiraling back into him with each heartbeat. The doll's eyes glinted in the darkness, watching him, waiting for him to make a choice. As Night Deep wrapped its cool fingers around the house, the shadows grew in strength. They whispered chants, rhythms of names long forgotten, inviting him deeper into the haunted fray. Their seductive murmurs lulled him into surrender, for in the aching darkness, he felt less alone, even as the shadows swirled around him, merging and dissolving into an all-consuming despair. "We are one, Oliver," it sang like a lullaby, sweet and dangerous all at once. "We are home." Embraced by the darkness, he wandered aimlessly through hallways thick with decay, gnarled roots twisting from walls and ceilings, a grotesque web of existence that devoured hope. Paintings hung crookedly, their images faded and forgotten, illustrating scenes of joy that now felt distant, as if they belonged to another world entirely. Oliver often lost count of the souls he encountered, all trapped and writhing in the shadows, begging silently as they glided past him. A motley collection of figures who they shared a bond stronger than blood but forged in unfathomable horror. They looked like characters from some long-lost fairy tale, but their stories had turned sour, their faces twisted into expressions of yearning and anguish. One evening, however, the whispers took on a different tone. They were thick with malicious glee, tinged with a sinister anticipation. "All will soon be yours," they seemed to hiss, weaving an eerie web of expectation around him. The sounds coiled and turned like a snake, tightening with every passing moment, increasing in intensity as if they could sense a horrible climax was approaching. Oliver felt the shift. Something grotesque waited just outside the familiar rhythm of despair. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown. "What will I become?" He whispered helplessly to the walls, but only their silence responded, thick and foreboding, pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. That night, the house twisted into something unrecognizable, morphing with a living intensity, shadows spiraling into a singular, predatory force that seemed to coalesce into a shape that made his heart race. It was a thing of nightmares, neither fully single nor truly collective, an unholy entity born from the suffering of all those who lingered too long within its embrace. Twisted faces emerged from the darkness, their expressions of agony mingling with despair, longing to be freed. Oliver felt both fear and an unexplainable connection to these lost souls. And there, forced to confront the terror they had unknowingly all contributed to, a choice presented itself. The swirling shadows whispered of surrender. He could yield, enveloped in the haunting darkness, or he could resist, living out an existence of eternal longing, forever tormented by the hollowing echo of despair. And as he stood frozen in place, caught in between choices, the shadows surged once more, growing thicker and more menacing, reminding him of what awaited him should he decide. "Stay with us or meet a fate far worse, Oliver," it beckoned, pulling tighter on the strings of his consciousness like puppet strings manipulated by a cruel puppeteer. The choice was dreadful yet strangely comforting, like a warm blanket that suffocated him at the same time. Compelled by a fear that ran deeper than his instinct for survival, he felt himself slipping away, the boundaries of his being blurring with the grasp of the darkness surrounding him. Each choice slipping from his grasp as though the shadows consumed him whole. "No," he gasped, the rebel inside him crying out for escape. But the declaration turned into a scream, a phantom cry lost to time in the swirling vortex of the shadows now consuming him. No one would hear him. It dawned upon him that this moment embodied the essence of his existence, lost and unheard. And as he merged with the abyss, becoming nothing more than an echo in the dark, laughter reverberated against the walls, a sinister symphony of tortured souls ensnared for eternity. The hollow voice no longer called him, it was merely a whisper in the dark, an unending reminder of the choices he had made. In the days that followed, Oliver felt as though he floated through a world turned upside down. The house had taken him deeper than he ever thought possible. It was like entering a never-ending dream where every corner turned led to another never-ending hall, another sorrowful face, another memory long lost to the shadows. The echo of his laughter seemed to mingle with the surroundings, an ironic twist of fate. The joy he once felt was twisted into something grotesque, racked with sadness. He witnessed moments that replayed like an old movie, capturing the essence of happiness tinged with loss. The house had captured snippets of lives that had been filled with laughter and light, moments now concealed in its treacherous embrace. Shadows of children playing in an open field danced across the tattered walls, their innocent giggles fading into haunting cries. He felt their sadness pull him closer to the void, a magnetic force that entranced him even further. Day by day, Oliver lost more of himself to the house. His thoughts became muddied with the sorrowful stories it told. Each lost soul that wandered its halls seemed to share their tales with him, feeding off his yearning for connection, his need to remember what joy felt like. As he mulled over their anguish, he also began absorbing some of their strength. In a strange, twisted way, he felt a sense of unity with these lost figures, like they were old friends sharing a collective burden. But he couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom that crept closer with each passing moment. The house seemed to pulse with a life force of its own, growing darker and more oppressive. The threshold between reality and illusion blurred further until they were indistinguishable. It enveloped him, holding him in a suffocating embrace, whispering sweet but cruel promises of solace and togetherness, while outside, life continued, blissfully ignorant of the battles being fought within its walls. Trapped within the depths of the house, a sense of waiting lingered thick in the air, as though he stood at the edge of something monumental. What comes next? He wondered. He felt tension mounting, like the cresting wave of an ocean before it crashed. Was it a new beginning, or an end of something he had yet to fully comprehend? Each corner of the house began to feel like a prison cell, narrowing down to a small box, suffocating him. The shadows shrieked with laughter, the cruel mirror of the fun he once had. They wanted him to choose, to surrender, to become part of the stories they spun. He could feel their longing to pull him entirely into their dark embrace, to make him one of them, forever trapped but never alone. "Join us," they cried, their voices intertwining in a horrible symphony. "Don't you see? You can have everything you've ever wanted." But even as he was tempted, doubt lingered in his heart. He could still hear those echoes of laughter from his past, the warmth of the sun on his face, the feeling of running free through open field, and the comfort of stories told under starlit skies. Could he really abandon all that for the hollow promise of belonging to something that thrived on pain? No, he whispered, though he hardly recognized his own voice, crumbling beneath the weight of the choice laid out before him. Could he truly resist, fight against the darkness that desperately wished to consume him? Yet, even as the depths of the shadows threatened to swallow him whole, a flicker of hope emerged from within his heart. Perhaps it was not too late. The memory of laughter, of joy, of the love he had known, stirred a rebellion deep inside him. With every ounce of strength he could muster, he concentrated on that light, that fleeting warmth. But the darkness was powerful, a tidal wave crashing against his meager flame. "You can't escape," it roared back, shoving him against the intangible wall of despair. He could feel himself slipping, but his heart beat fiercely, reminding him of the life he had lived beyond these wretched walls. As the shadows closed in, Oliver took a deep breath, steadying himself. "No, I want to be free," he shouted, his voice cutting through the laughter like a sword. "I refuse to be a part of this." And in that moment of defiance, something shifted. The house groaned, its walls quaking as shadows writhed and twisted, recoiling from the brightness of his resolve. He felt the weight pressing down, loosening, if only just a little, a window of possibility opening at last. The echoes of laughter began to fade, smothered by his rising roar of determination. "I will not become a hollow echo," he proclaimed, and the darkness wailed as if a storm had struck. Oliver felt a surge of energy within himself, a light blossoming that pushed back against the suffocating void attempting to claim him. In a whirlwind of motion, he turned away from the gathering shadows and fled, racing through the twisted halls. The shadows screeched behind him, grappling to cling to his being, but he pressed on, his heartbeat echoing through the darkness. And just like that, the struggle between light and darkness illuminated the path before him. Time might still be nebulous, but Oliver found an unexpected clarity. Perhaps the house was not just a prison. Perhaps it held the memories and sorrows of souls that longed to escape, and through his courage, he could show them the path back to light. With renewed resolve, he ran deeper into the heart of the house, determined to unravel the ties that bound him and the restless souls trapped within the darkness. If the house had become a monster, he would not let it break him. He would become their beacon, the bridge between shadow and light. It started with a whisper, a flicker of hope amid smoke and mirrors. "Come with me," he called softly, urging the fragmented souls around him, drawing on their stories, their laughter from lives long lost, hoping they would join him in his resolve. And somehow, through this strange bond forged through suffering and despair, they began to rise. So together, A phantom of children long ago, a spirit of laughter, and a courageous boy stepped into the darkened depths of their prison, hand in hand against despair. No longer echoes of the past, they forged a path towards the light, claiming their freedom once and for all.